Just days before the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the futures market crashed. A scandal that had been brewing for years hit its breaking point. A young man from the Bronx, who started out just trying to get by, but quickly fell into a pattern of conning people, companies, and even the United States government, would undertake his most daring con yet, attempting to corner the market on a soybean-based oil. This is the Great Salad Oil Scandal of 1963. So kick back with a bowl of leafy greens and your favorite dressing as we learn something new. In the late 1940s, a combination of several factors led to an enormous increase in the production of soybean oil in the United States. First, soybeans are relatively cheap and easy to grow, producing their beans quickly. Advances in technology allowed for better extraction of the oil from the beans, as well as the production of safer and better tasting oil. And second, in the post-World War II economic boom, the demand for products that could be made from soybean oil grew enormously. Those products included non-edible items such as paint and plastics, and a wide variety of food and cooking products, including margarine, salad dressings, and cooking oils. By the 1950s, the United States was the world's leading soybean oil producer, and by the early 1960s, there was actually a soybean oil surplus. That's where Anthony D. Angelus, who often went by Tino, came in. He was born in 1915 in the Bronx, New York, and according to a 1963 New York Times article, he dropped out of school at the age of 17 to work to support himself financially. He went to work at a meat cutter's plant where he would quickly find himself moving up the ranks. By the age of 20, he was the foreman of the plant, supervising upwards of 200 people. He would later take control over a meat packing company and come to realize that through the newly passed National School Lunch Act, the government would pretty much buy any meat so long as it hit a certain price point. Tino made the choice then to put his own financial benefit over the quality of food intended for children, immediately selling the government substandard meat at inflated prices, overcharging the government by thousands for a product they couldn't even use. He was caught, and the company was fined over $1 million and prohibited from bidding on government contracts again in the future. It couldn't survive the hit and went bankrupt, but Tino managed to land on his feet, forming the Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Refining Company in 1955 in order to take part in a different government program, the Food for Peace program. The program was designed to sell surplus food products to Europe at a discount to help them continue to recover from World War II. Naturally, Tino fell right back into his old tricks and sold a tremendous amount of substandard shortening and other vegetable oil products overseas. In 1962, Tino decided to take his scheming to the next level. His plan was to corner the whole soybean oil market. He planned to use his current supply of oil as collateral for a loan. He would then take the loan and buy soybean oil futures. So before we get into the next part, let's talk about what a commodity futures contract is. It's essentially an agreement to buy or sell a predetermined amount of a certain commodity at a certain price on a specific date in the future. Imagine going up to your neighbor who is farming corn and agreeing to buy it in 1 year for $1.05, while the current rate of corn is $1. If in a year the same corn costs $1.50, then you're coming out ahead, buying $1.50 of corn for $1.05, and your neighbor is eating the loss. But if the price falls to 80 cents, then you are paying more than the going rate for the corn, and thus your neighbor is making more of a profit. That's where the risk of commodity futures trading comes in. The idea is that when his future contract matured, he would be able to buy it at one price, turn it around and sell it at a higher price, paying off his loan and pocketing the profit. On paper, this is a perfectly legitimate, though risky, business transaction. But Tino didn't want to stop there. Tino would get the loan from American Express, specifically a newly created field warehousing division of American Express, and American Express would come by and validate how much oil Tino was holding and write him a warehouse receipt. That warehouse receipt basically said that American Express validated that Tino had as much vegetable oil as he claimed to. Tino could then take that receipt to a bank or broker and offer it as collateral for cash. At first, everything was running legitimately. But over time, Tino noticed how relaxed the inspection was, and he started to reduce the actual oil he had on hand. Eventually, the tanks were mostly filled with seawater with a small layer of oil on top, since oil and water don't mix. He also built a complex system of pipes that let him shift the oil from one tank to another as needed. The inspections were scheduled weekly, usually on Fridays and Saturdays, and were never surprise inspections, giving Tino plenty of heads up. The inspector would occasionally take samples of the tank, but only from the top, after he would certify that Allied Crude had that much vegetable oil on hand. However, it was quickly apparent in hindsight that if the inspector or American Express were paying any attention, they would have quickly found out that they had guaranteed that Tino was holding more oil than the Department of Agriculture reported existed in the entire United States. But they didn't. Tino shopped those warehouse-verified receipts from the inspectors around and used them to borrow money from companies such as Bank of America and Procter & Gamble, as well as other brokerage houses and banks. By the time his scheme collapsed, he managed to get money from 51 different companies. The fraud was exposed when an anonymous whistleblower contacted American Express and recommended its inspectors look closely at one of Allied's most massive soybean oil tanks. Upon giving it a closer look, the inspectors discovered the deception. It turned out Tino was only holding 4% of the oil he claimed to have. On November 19, 1963, Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Refining Corporation filed for bankruptcy, setting off several events in rapid succession, including a more than 20% decline in soybean oil futures. Tino filed for personal bankruptcy as well, leaving American Express to foot the bill on the bad loans, which resulted in their stock dropping almost 50%. In addition to American Express, the scandal weakened other Wall Street firms, which contributed to the financial chaos as just a few days later, the president was assassinated. The market shut down from the assassination until the following Tuesday, which gave the New York Stock Exchange time to deal with one of the biggest losers of the situation, Ira Hapt. They had managed to raise $100 million to make Ira Hapt's customers whole. This was the first time in the history of the stock exchange that the stock exchange took responsibility for a firm's failure, bailing out the company that had no way of paying back over $300 million that they owed. It's believed that the 51 companies affected lost a combined $2 billion. But someone benefited yet from the situation. Warren Buffett had been looking into American Express at the time as a potentially good investment opportunity. He knew the fundamentals of American Express was strong, and so believed that the drop was not going to be permanent. He invested $20 million from his company and ended up being on the right side of the money, earning around 10 times his original investment in the next decade. As for Tino, he went to prison for his fraud, sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, but was released on parole after only 7. Leaving prison, he was quoted as saying, "Coming here actually saved my life. I came in here weighing 250 pounds and left weighing 170. Spiritually, physically, and morally, this prison has saved my life." It's a good thing he enjoyed his time in prison, because he was sent back in 1980 after creating a Ponzi scheme concerning cattle in the Midwest, costing those who fell for it millions of dollars. He was released again in 1983 and then sent back to jail for more fraud at the age of 77 in 1993 for 21 months. In 2009, he passed away at the age of 93. It makes me wonder if it's a case of having never learned his lesson, or having learned the wrong one. Thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you made it this far, it would mean a ton if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next one.